More and more people who work in corporate America are looking for more flexibility in their personal and professional lives, and according to CNBC, they're willing to quit their jobs in order to accomplish that desired goal. According to the outlet, roughly 47 million people quit their jobs last year, plunging the labor market into uncharted territory. It is estimated a record 43 million people quit their jobs in December of last year, according to the Labor Department's Job Opening and Labor Turnover Report. Closing out a record-shattering year with more than 47.4 million people voluntarily leaving their jobs for better working conditions during the pandemic and Great Resignation. Tracy Wilson says that leaving a highly paid and influential, but yet soul-crushing corporate job was one of the best decisions she's ever made, outside of marrying the love of her life and having children, of course. And now she finds her passion and purpose by assisting entrepreneurs and business owners multiply their reach, influence, and authority, while also making an income and impact while doing what they love. If you're trying to determine how to build exposure, influence, and authority with content that reaches your right target audience, which draws people in to your online business, then you'll want to stick around to hear what Tracy has to share. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Tracy, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. I'll wish you a good morning, and I'm excited to talk to you today all about your journey in business and entrepreneurship. Great to be with you, and thank you so very much for being here.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, Kevin.
As am I, and just before we dive into our formal discussion about your business journey, Tracy, you tell me that quitting your corporate job, even though it was financially fulfilling and had a bit of influence, it was one of the best decisions you made. So I'm wondering if you could tell me all about the decision and why you believe it was so important.
Absolutely. Well, and I've lost track of time now, but if I go back maybe 9 or 10 years, I had a very successful career in the corporate world. I was a regional manager of one of the major banks in Australia and prior to that in New Zealand. And I was lucky enough that I was able to climb that corporate ladder from a very young age. And actually, Kevin, I never thought that I would leave that. I actually thought I joined that organisation. I was almost married to it. I could look at the logo of the corporation and feel like I could almost cry. I was that attached to it. But as the years went on and I sort of got to a point in my career where I thought, do you know what, this is just not, not doing it for me anymore. I'm not feeling as fulfilled as I had been in the past. And there was a serendipitous moment where part of my role while I was working for this large corporation was to promote women's markets. So making sure that all of our small business women in small business had an opportunity to be able to shine and be able to share their their business, and also be able to make various different connections, which required me to put on various different networking events. And at this particular time, I was approached by a lady who asked if she could come in and do a talk to all of our small business clients. Anyhow, I put on this event that had, over 100 odd people at it, a number of those, and it gave her an opportunity to speak to all of these small business clients. And at that time, that really was my first glimpse into this world of coaching and training, really outside of the corporate world, because what she was doing is she had created an online program that then taught people some fundamental skills about business. And anyhow, as I put this event on, I noticed that as she was speaking, at the end of her talk, she did a bit of a pitch, and there were hundreds of people running to the front of the room wanting to sign up. And that was, one of those moments where I thought, what's going on here? I'm really intrigued by what's happening, and perhaps I could do that. And interestingly enough, after that event, a lot of my team came to me and said, Trace, you could do that. And I thought, gosh, I'd actually really like to. And one thing led to another, and I actually ended up working with that woman for a period of time, and that really gave me the opportunity to step out of the corporate world and into the coaching space and the online world. It just so happened at that very moment, the bank was going through a restructure too. So sort of all things collided, became the perfect storm, and gave me the opportunity to leave the organisation and start my own thing.
Yeah, and now you've taken that sort of initiative to help entrepreneurs and business owners sort of multiply their reach, influence, and authority on what they love to do. So I'm wondering if you could tell me all about it.
I sure can. So, my business has really, progressed, or has changed over a number of years, or developed over a number of years. Like I said, when I first jumped out of the banking organisation, I actually started just coaching small business owners. But since then, as I continue to move forward and realising that a big part of your success as an entrepreneur who works online is your ability to be able to reach people. And initially, as I was doing that, I realized that there were some fundamental things that I was having some challenges with. And as time has gone on, I started to hone in my skills, hone in the systems and the processes that I was using, to a point where they're working particularly well for me. And I started to put a system around those, and I'm now really excited that I'm actually able to help other entrepreneurs take what I now know, shortcut their experience and their journey, and enabling them to be able to multiply their reach, and also at the same time be able to increase their influence and their authority, while they're actually then able to make an impact and an income whilst doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to help people with a cheat sheet when we can, right?
Oh, you betcha. It saves them having to go through some of the challenges that maybe that you and I have faced, right?
Well, yeah, including getting this conversation started, but we figured it out, right?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. Where there's a will, there's a way, I always say.
Absolutely, and I know you're also the co-founder and creator of something called Freedom Sneak Her Way. So I'm wondering if you can tell me all about it. Sounds like an interesting concept.
I sure can. So my business partner, Vicky Helm, and I have been in business for a number of years. So as I said, I'm nearly a decade. She's been a business owner for almost 30. So between the two of us, we had a whole lot of skill, knowledge, and expertise. And again, we were sort of looking at what are the key things that really high-level professionals who are stepping out of their corporate careers and into something new. We would call it, almost like their second time around career. So that they're doing their encore career at this point, and they're stepping into the online space. And what they're wanting to do is take their skills, their knowledge, their expertise that they have accumulated over the many years of professional work, and be able to put that into some sort of business ecosystem that enables them to do the same, build their influence, create some authority, make an impact, and make an income. right? And turn a profit. So when we started thinking about that, we're like, well, what are these people? What are we doing? Well, they are freedom seekers. They've stepped out of their corporate role. They've got a lot of, experience, and they're wanting some way of being able to create a level of freedom in their life, which enables them to work when they want, how they want, and be able to earn as much as they would like to earn. So in saying that, we came up with it's a three-pronged approach. So part one of that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it because the ACE method that we will chat about lends itself well to this process. But essentially it is taking your skills, knowledge, and your expertise, and be able to turn that into some sort of digital product, educational style product, where you can impart those skills, knowledge, and expertise on to somebody else and share that with someone else, but turning that into a business. So that's the freedom seeker's way, and it encompasses three parts to it. So the first part is being able to share your skills and knowledge through having your own podcast or live show. The second part is creating your online program or course, and each person has a very different, different driver, depending on what it is that they want out of their business as to which direction we advise them to go down. And then the third component of that is actually taking those skills, those knowledge and expertise, and turning it into their own book. And that really rounds out the freedom seekers way, or the ecosystem that we enable them to create.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you brought it up, I'll ask you this question about the emergence of podcasting and using it as really a new form of a medium to connect with people. How important do you think the art of podcasting has become for online entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. I think, over the last, from what the research that we've done and looking at some of the things that have been emerging over the last, sort of 10 years, podcasting has really come to the forefront, and a lot of entrepreneurs are saying, well, hey, I need to get my message out to the world in a much bigger way. How can I do that? And podcasting is a fantastic way of being able to do it. I mean, both you and I have tapped into the power of podcasting, right? Because we're here doing it right now. But what it really does enable you to do is to distill down your skills and your knowledge. And when you're my preferred method is doing it via video. And the reason I do that, and why I recommend that others do that, because it really does enable you to show your authentic self. There is no hiding when you're doing video, and I do live video, so there absolutely is no hiding with that. I can't go away, edit out the oopsies. I have to be on my game, and I have to be able to, to speak at the drop of a hat. So I'm a really big fan of podcasting and being a live show host. What we're, and when we're talking about trying to cut through into a market, because most people have a very short attention span these days, but a lot of people choose to listen to podcasts. So it's really important that when we become a podcaster, that we're actually sharing, our best, most valuable stuff in those moments, because otherwise your listeners are not going to become long-term followers and long-term listeners, and you won't get as many downloads, right? So I'm a big fan of doing podcasting, but there is a real knack to it, and you have to have some level of stamina and commitment to this particular platform to ensure that you have longevity here, because most people, even though there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of podcasts, most of them never make it past the first 6 episodes.
Yeah, it's really a labor of love and a labor of commitment too, isn't it?
Absolutely. But it's, in my opinion, for me personally, it has been one of the most, rewarding things that I've ever started in my business, for a number of reasons.
It really puts you in touch with your authentic self, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does. But, I get to speak to wonderful people like you from all over the world. And so your networks really do grow, and your ability to be able to converse with somebody, you really start to sharpen that sword, because you're doing it on the regular.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy, I know you know this for doing your research on me, but I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy. And
Hmm.
outside of hosting this podcast and using this platform as another vehicle to do this, I work with organizations to really help them streamline their or promoting the need to hire people with disabilities. And I really think that online businesses and using this online platform is a real way to get people with disabilities out in the forefront. So when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion for folks with disabilities from a business perspective, what comes to mind on your end of things?
Oh, I think that's super important. I mean, I take my hat off to you. I think you're doing an amazing job. And, you're absolutely right that this platform, it doesn't discriminate. That's a great thing about it. Anybody can pick up, the microphone and start talking and start, sharing their skills and their expertise. And, ensuring that your business is not only versatile but is totally inclusive and willing to work with people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, I think is extremely important. And as somebody who is in, when you're a podcaster or you're doing a live show, you're somebody who's in the public eye. We want to make sure that I say that to make for a better world, inclusivity is definitely the way forward. Diversity, inclusion, and really being kind to other people is extremely important in this day and age, I think. So I'm a big fan of what you're doing.
Well, thanks for that. And I also know that you've also translated some of these messages into books that you've written. So tell me about the books that you've written and the message you try to deliver through the written word as well.
Absolutely. So I've spoken a little bit about the Freedom Seekers Way, but I actually run a number of different businesses, and those businesses that I create are really from a place of I'm passionate about these particular things. So the first book I wrote. So a couple of them I've written with my very good friend and business partner, Vicky Helm. So the first one was a book called The She Myth. And interestingly enough, when Vicky and I first got together and she started asking me questions about my background, and I was actually on her podcast. And this book was born as a result of a conversation that her and I had on a podcast. So interesting that you and I are talking about this now. So anyway, I was on her podcast. She was asking me about my background. And after that podcast interview, she said, "Oh my God, Trace, you need to write a book. We've got to write a book about this." And so from that, the She Myth was born. Now, this book does have my story in it. It talks about the challenges that we often can face as women, the myths that we often take on board and we turn them into our truths, and recognizing that a lot of the time these things that we grow up with, and you might some of these things, even though I'm talking about them from a woman's perspective, they may resonate with you. Being, you're a woman, surely you can't run a really good business. You're not pretty enough to do things. You're not capable of doing that because. So my background is I was a teenage mum. And so way back then when I had my first son, who's now almost 31, that's really showing my age. So 31 now, and I've gone on to have two other children with the same person. My husband and I have been happily married and together since we were very, very young. But going back to that, the number of people that would tell me that, this can't possibly work, you two won't be together, you're going to be a solo mother, you can't, so all of those things. And so that's a combination of my story inside of this, but also the inspiration to say to other women that, hey, even though society might tell you that these are the things you can't do, you absolutely can, and this is how how. So we've redefined the way in which women do business. So that's what the she myth is all about. It's about shedding those myths, recreating the you that you want to be, recognizing your inner genius, and then understanding how do you take that inner genius that you have and actually turn it into something very valuable in the way of a business. So that's the she myth. The other book that we've written is called Seven Figure Mentor, and that talks about the shift from being a coach to becoming a mentor of people, and how there is an opportunity for you to step into that world of mentorship and make a living out of it. And you'll see that all of these books that we've written really do summarize themselves into the program that we created called the Freedom Seekers Way. Now, there's another passion project that I created, and this really comes from my my love of my family, and coming from a really big family and moving from one country to another, and sort of having those cultural ties, not broken, but stretched, because I'm no longer in my home country. It really made me start thinking about the value of family, and so I created, along with my husband and my children, something called Project Unite Us. And again, it's all about uniting families together, because we believe that together we are much stronger, and being able to ensure that your family history, stories, legacies are maintained intact, and that your family has the opportunity to be able to tell, to be able to take those stories, preserve those stories, tell them and share them, so that that your history, your traditions, and your culture remain strong no matter where your family moves to in the world. So that's been a really, really interesting project that I've been working on. And I wrote a book with that called The Legacy Builders Playbook. And it really gets people to think about, and it's interesting because you actually asked this question, right? And when you shot me some messages through and said, I'd love to know what your legacy is. But we really get people to start thinking about what is the legacy that they want to leave, in this world, in this lifetime that they are here. And most people don't even give that a second thought. They don't think about it.
Yeah, it's important to really zero in on your moment of impact of why we're still here, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, for me, I've really put the foot on the pedal with that particular project, because my mum passed away earlier this year, and it really has given me an opportunity to reflect on, who she was, what did I really know about her, what could I take about my mum's life and be able to pass that on to my grandchildren to ensure that her legacy is never forgotten. So it's those sorts of things, and that's really really dear to my heart, that particular project.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that you're making your mom proud on all of the extraordinary work that you're doing, for sure. And I'm wondering your thoughts, Tracy, also on the concept of business versatility and diversification. How do you think those two things are interwoven together?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so business versatility. I think there's there's a number of different ways that we can look at that, but essentially, it's being able to look at the market and be able to be agile enough to make decisions and make changes in your business when required. We know that the business world is moving at pace. We know that, it already alluded to the fact that we as humans have very little attention span, and in fact the statistics now tell us that we have less attention span than a goldfish, which is less than 7 seconds. So when you think about that, things are moving at pace. So as a business owner, it's really important that we remain agile, that we remain with our ear to the ground and start to really see what's actually going on in the business world, and use our capacity, the skills, the knowledge, and the experience that we have to be able to make the changes or the pivots that we require to be able to stay in check with what's happening in the business world and or ahead of the curve.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy, when we talk about the concept of empowerment from a woman's perspective, you talked about it earlier in our conversation, but I'm wondering if you could dive a little bit deeper on what women's empowerment means to you personally and in business as well.
Absolutely. Look, as far as empowerment is concerned, I think it's interesting because I think about this now, and it's not something as a child that I really thought that I even knew anything about. Right, I was quite a shy, it's not timid, but would make sure that I did the right thing all the time as a child, and so therefore growing up, even in the corporate world, you tried to do everything the way that everybody expected you to do it. And then as I got a little bit older, I started to realize that, empowerment comes from being able to be authentically you, being comfortable in your own skin, being certain in what you want in life. So having the empowerment to be able to make changes, be able to say this is who I am, and almost be unapologetic about it, right? So I think there is a real need for women to be all of those things, be authentically you. It was interesting because I was watching something, I think it might have even been on TikTok the other day, and this woman was on there and she was saying, you have to be you have to look after your children and stay at home and look after them. But if you stay at home, you're not very capable. So there were all of these different layers of things that as women we are almost given two pathways. You either do or you don't. And what I want to say to women is that you can actually have it all. How do you bring it all together, be empowered to be able to create a life that you want, not the type of life that you think society thinks you should create? So that's what I think about women's empowerment, and I'm very much about diversification, very much about inclusion. So definitely not a one track mind. It's all about women, because I'm married and I actually have 3 boys. So I'm very much about empowering men to do what they're all about too. So to me, it's more about authenticity, and it's about doing what you truly want, and how do you create the life that you want and leave a legacy that you would be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about starting an online business, Tracy, I'm wondering if you have sort of a blueprint or non-negotiables you think people should follow once they enter the realm of the online business world.
That's a really great question, and I think, like I said, that this has evolved over time. So what would I say right now? I think if you are going to go down the line of creating an online business, you want to really go at it from a point of view of you are creating a business. And I think a big mistake that people make is that, hey, I'm creating an online business, and therefore I sort of, it's almost as if we throw a lot of the traditional business concepts out of the window. And I want everybody to think that if they are doing this, you are essentially all you're doing is you are building a traditional style business essentially, but you're actually placing it, instead of placing it in the street down the road, you're actually placing it on a street on the internet. So I want people to think, to think about, first and foremost, what kind of business do they want? But that comes back to what sort of lifestyle do they want? Because again, I think one of the big mistakes people make is they go down the path of listening to somebody else. They create something that somebody else tells them to do, but actually find that further on down the track that what they've now created actually doesn't lend itself well to the type of lifestyle or way in which they want to live. So the first thing I would do is look at that, and then look at what sort of people do you want to be working with, and more importantly, what sort of people do you not want to be working with. And that's really going to help you to narrow down and get really clear on what kind of business do you want to create. Then start thinking about how much commitment are you prepared to give to this. Are you prepared to work 6 in the morning till 9 or 10 at night? Do you not want to do that and only work a few hours a day? All of these sorts of things come into play. So yes, as far as a blueprint we do have, and it is about taking people through this process and then coming out the other end and saying, well, based on what you actually want and based on the lifestyle, the freedom that you are seeking, this is the structure and the style of business that you need to create, because they come in all different shapes and forms.
Yeah, and you said something that piqued my interest. So I'll ask this question this way. Sometimes narrowing your focus can really be a competitive advantage, can it?
Absolutely. And often in this online space, being too broad is not your friend. You want to get as narrowed down as you possibly can. And one of the things that, one of my mentors told me is, if you're doing a lot of custom style work, and it almost sounds a little bit strange that I've said every single person, the way in which they create their business is different, but the process in which we teach them to get to that point is the same. Right. So when you want to narrow down your focus and you want to become very good so that you've got leverage and scalability in your business, you need to set up a system and a process that is almost a rinse and repeat, but enables some level of customization at the customer's end of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked earlier about your live show that you host. So I'll give you the floor to tell me all about the show that you host and the podcast that you've produced as well.
Yeah, well, I've gone down the path of creating a live show, and that live show enables me to turn that into a podcast. So I did that for a number of reasons. So it's called the Unlocked with Tracy Wilson, and in that show I really appeal to people who are starting out and wanting to create their own online business. And I talk about all things when it comes to live shows or podcasting, because this is part of the process that we teach, right? So remember at the beginning I talked about having the live show and then creating your online program and then writing a book. So these are actually the three things that I fundamentally speak about on the Unlock show: how to create your content, how to create a connection with your audience, how to then take what your skills and your knowledge that you have and turn that into an online business, and then how do you take all of that and elevate your level of authority by writing your own book on that subject matter that you are so so skilled at.
Yeah, absolutely. Tracy, I'm wondering your thoughts on how online businesses can really stay relevant, because uh, so many people have made the shift to online, and I guess my question is, how do you make sure your business doesn't become overly saturated and sort of lost in the shuffle of everything else?
That's a really good question, and it comes back to that adaptability and being, staying abreast of what's going on in the market, but also making sure that you are getting regular feedback. So making sure that you have some way of being able to get the feedback from your audience on the regular. So whether you're using, social listening apps, or whether you're just talking to people and asking them questions, or even doing things like the sorts of stuff that's worked particularly well for us is doing quizzes and doing surveys, because that way we can get to the crux of what's going on in the market right now, and being able to adapt what we're teaching, the message that we're sending out into the market, and making sure that that's still on point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy, I'm curious to dive into just a little bit of your personal life as well, because I know you're currently living in Australia, but you're originally from New Zealand. So tell me about your family origin, where you come from, and why it was important for you to sort of spread your wings and move to Australia and away from your home country.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I mean, I'm a proud New Zealand Maori, so that's my background. And, I born and bred in New Zealand. My father is actually English, so I have, a very, well, interesting heritage, most of which, I really feel connected to my New Zealand culture, which is New Zealand Maori. And I moved to Australia because the bank actually offered me an opportunity, a promotion, and a transfer. So back in, gosh, it was early 2000s, when my children were still, early teenagers. My eldest was, I think he was 11, and then my youngest was 8. So, we had an opportunity to move over to Australia, and it was interesting at that time because I was actually doing really, really well in my career, had all my family surrounding me over there. Didn't really have, I mean, I had some family over here, cousins and aunts and things, which made it a little bit easier to move to Australia. But back then I actually had, it was a bit of a funny story because I ended up over here almost by mistake. The bank had brought out a new system where you could enter all of your details and it would match you with different jobs. And so I was testing this out so that I could actually share how to use this careers system with my team. And anyway, one thing led to another, click far too many buttons. And before I knew it, without actually knowing it, I had applied for a job in Australia. And the next day I got a phone call from the regional management team over here in Australia saying, hey, we got your application, but you didn't, there was no resume or covering letter or anything attached to it. And I'd almost had a heart attack. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I wasn't supposed to do that. Explained to them what I was doing in terms of training. And they said, well, actually, we've already done our background work on you and we're really interested in you coming over to Australia. And I told them no at the time, got off the phone, rang my husband and said, you'll never guess what's just happened. And he said, what? I told him, and he's like, oh my God, bring them back, find out what they're offering. So I was like, are you for real? Like, we've just built a house, the kids are only small, right? Can we really do this? And he's like, yeah, ring them back, find out more. So I did, and as you know, that then was like they offered a opportunity too good to be true. So we had a meeting with the kids at the time. They were only small, saying, what do you guys think? We've got an opportunity to move to Australia. Do you want to go? Let's have a family vote. The kids all voted unanimously to come to Australia. And so that's what we did. We packed everything up, sold our house, and within 6 weeks we were relocated to Australia. But that has, that's been a fantastic move, a huge amount of opportunities for the children here. But like I alluded to earlier, it does tend to remove you somewhat from your culture. And I'm really, really passionate about that and really want to make sure that I and my children and my grandchildren remain connected to that culture, because I've realized, and again through a bit of research, that when you migrate to another country, it only takes 2 generations before your connection and your your sense of belonging to that particular culture is eroded. So now I have grandchildren here in Australia, and it's really important to me that they understand that their heritage and where they come from, and that they are of New Zealand Maori descent.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to take advantage of the opportunities you're given in life, but it's also important to remember where you come from, right?
Absolutely. I think it's vitally important. There's so many stories that can be told, so many questions that can be answered for people as to where do I come from and where do I get those traits from, and why am I the way that I am. So there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom that is embedded into our DNA through where we come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tracy, my final question for you has to do with celebrating the wins in life. Because, I'm a huge believer of no matter how big or small the win is in life, it's important to celebrate it. So my final question has to do with how do you celebrate the wins in life, and Going back to our original premise of this conversation, how do you want your individual legacy to be determined?
Um, so in terms of like celebrating wins, I mean, I think that just comes with often with the attitude and the way in which you look at life. You know, I mean, if you're celebrating a win, it might just be something very, very simple for me. It might be just a yes, yes, that just feels so good. Like I did that. I've accomplished something. So it could be something as small as that. I mean, my husband and I'm not really one for big celebrations or big, yahoos. I managed to do that, but just very, try to be quite humble with any, wins that we have, and just saying, that was great. We did good with that, and just knowing that the attitude that we bring into each and every day enables you to have a life that is full of winning moments. And they, dare I say it, they kind of become the norm rather than the exception. Do you know what I mean? And then to your point of what do I want my legacy to be? And given that I've thought about this a lot. I've thought about, obviously I've written the book, the Legacy Builders Playbook. And I believe that, a lot of people look at legacy as just being the monetary thing or the assets that you can pass down to others, but it's a whole lot more than that. It's how I behave, how I show up, what I do. A lot of the things the legacy that I want to leave is that people will look at me and be able to say, she did a great job. She was somebody whom, wasn't afraid to give things a go. She's been successful, and and that I truly cared about people, that when people were in my presence, I was present actually with them, and that my presence made them feel like they were important and that they actually mattered. If someone were standing, and again, because I've just recently done this with my mum, when you're reading someone's eulogy, you're trying to get out in 5 minutes, the best of their 65-year life. So if you had to distill that down for yourself, what would you want people to stand up and say at your eulogy? And for me, it is about that. It is about that I was somebody that had the ability to bring out the best in people, that I cared about them, that I enabled them to see their own magic, and that I was a teacher and a sharer that was willing to share my wisdom, and I did it with grace. That's what I want my legacy to be.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, you're off to an outstanding start in accomplishing that goal for sure.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And tell me, what is the best way for people to get in contact with you if they're so inclined to get involved with the good work that you do?
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple of different ways that they can connect with me. So I'm on all social media platforms. So if you go to Facebook, you'll find me at Tracy M. Wilson. If you go to my website, tracymwilson.com, you can just connect with me there. And if you're inclined to want to start your own live show or podcast, or you're wanting to create your own Freedom Seekers Way with your own business ecosystem, then I would encourage you to get in touch with me. And of course, you can also tune in and listen to the Unlock Show with Tracy Wilson, again, on all the major podcasting platforms. You can tune in and listen to, I don't know, there's something like 180 odd episodes now.
Fabulous. Well, for someone that's been doing this podcasting thing for a while, and I know what it takes to engage an audience, and I really want to thank you for the work that you do in the podcasting space and in entrepreneurship to really make a difference. Tracy, I really enjoyed engaging in conversation with you today, and I really want to thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you. I likewise. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation too, Kevin. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.